you. Okay. All right. So here on our October lunch bunch, I know in the email we talked about the gas infrastructure plan, but I thought I would start out by just framing a little bit that this is really a broader utility accountability campaign. Mountain Mamas has been engaged with the Public Utilities Commission, which regulates our utilities for a number of years, working on different dockets, which we'll talk about what that is, throughout the years on various things that relate to our utilities, but they're all kind of connected, right? They're all connected in trying to help utilities meet their goals of reducing emissions, cleaning up our grid, cleaning up our air, and we all have a stake in this. And at the same time, making sure that we have clean, cheaper energy at the outcome. So I think sometimes it can get a little confusing because we send out emails and we want you to, send a written comment about this thing. And then a few months later, we're like, send a comment about this thing. And it's like, well, are these different campaigns or is this all the same thing? So I thought it might be just helpful to talk a little bit more broadly at first, and then we'll get into the more specifics about the gas infrastructure plan. So we'll start with, kind of the basics about what is the Public Utilities Commission, for those of you who haven't been super engaged in this work, and then kind of some basics about where Xcel is at, kind of the trends that we're seeing with Xcel around renewables, give an update on the docket that we worked on this past summer around the last coal plants that are closing in Colorado. Then we'll get into the gas infrastructure plan and talk about next steps after that. Oh, we have somebody joining us. Okay. All right, so what is the Public Utilities Commission and why do we care about them? They are a very impactful commission, regulatory body, basically. It's a 3-person body appointed by the governor, and their job is to, among other things, regulate our utilities and make sure that that our utilities are following state law and the values of our state, making sure that our utilities are providing service that's reliable, and that they're sort of the regulator of like our rates and those sorts of things. So they do have to consider public input when they're making decisions about utilities. And they sort of operate as a court. You can kind of think of the commission as judges, and the utilities have to present them with proposals, which essentially are docket. They call them dockets, which is like it's a system of work that a utility will propose that they have to be regulated around. The commission will listen and read their proposal, and then other entities like, environmental advocates or the business community or elected officials can weigh in on the proposal and say, well, I like this part of the proposal, but I don't like this other part of the proposal, or here's something new that maybe Xcel or others didn't think of that I think should be considered here. And then within that framework as well, the Public Utilities Commission will take public comment from either from written comments, or they will hold public hearings where you can log in. It's generally virtual at this point. Log in, give your input, and the Public Utilities Commission has to take that into consideration when they're making their decision. And so they will gather all of this evidence. Sometimes there's more than one step in the process before they make their decision. And they have many, 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 many dockets that they are dealing with throughout the year by utilities, and then there's other things that they regulate. But sometimes those those dockets can go on for several years. Sometimes they're quick and they're just a couple of months. But there's always something going that that our utilities are working within the confines of the Public Utilities Commission. And I also will just say that I think, you know, I certainly feel a lot of frustration with our current political systems, and have for years and years, not just this year, that like sometimes it can feel like you're testifying or you're sending an email or you're weighing in on something and it just doesn't ever go anywhere and it doesn't make a difference. But I think Meg can attest to this, that, you know, sometimes you're in these public hearings and there's only 50 people on the call, and you're one of 50 people making a comment, and it really does make an impact. It makes an outsized impact from like speaking with your U.S. senator, for example. So even though this part is like very technical, it's extremely impactful. So just to like make a little plug for how we can plug into this work and make a difference, it really does matter, and it matters in a much bigger way than I think most people realize.
Sarah?
So, oh yes.
The 3 members of the PUC appointed by are they nonpartisan? Are they oil and gas employees like CEOs and stuff, or do they have conflicts of interest as far as you know?
They do not. I think they have to have. This is a good question. I'll look into the specifics about how the governor has to choose, but I think they have to have. They can't all be Democrats. They can't all be Republicans. I think there has to be a variety of political affiliation. There can't be any conflict of interest. They may have some background in it, like, but for example, one of the commissioners used to work for, I think, Western Resource Advocates, or, you know, one of the like environmental groups, but obviously is not working for them now. So we have a pretty friendly PUC actually right now, which is a good thing, but no, yeah, they're not allowed to be having, they're not allowed to have a vested interest.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so just a few basics about Xcel. We know some of this, but Xcel is, of course, the biggest utility company in the state. They provide electricity to 1.6 million people and gas to 1.5 million people. This is a big overlap because many of us get both electric and gas from Xcel. It's a private company that operates in multiple states, and of course it's regulated by the PUC. And we're focusing on Xcel because they are the biggest and they are the loudest and they have the most resources to and so they're big influencers in sort of the trends that utilities move in. They continue to make record profits year after year. Household energy bills keep going up, as we are aware. Last year, they made $870 million in profit just in Colorado, and throughout all 8 states, they made $1.8 billion. One of the things that is very frustrating is that they are allowed to earn a 9.3% profit on new projects in Colorado. So that's like building a new gas plant, or in the old days, building a new coal plant, or even building solar and wind. But those things are cheaper to build. So this gives them incentive to build expensive infrastructure because that's where they make a lot of their profit. But the customers are really paying for those investments on our utility bills. And then also, just lastly, like, so we all know that even though they are making steady profits, they are planning to go to the PUC to ask for rate increases by the end of this year.
Sarah, I have another question. That 9.3% profit, I assume, is to incentivize them to build new stuff, that if they aren't allowed to make a profit, they'll be, why should we do anything, right?
Yeah.
Is there a figure that would be more equitable in terms of balancing their profit versus incentive? In your opinion, like, is 5% more? I mean, I don't
I,
understand why any company needs to make 1.8 billion and then raise our rates, but
yeah, I think the history of this profit percentage is that like utilities have been high risk investments and are high risk investments for investors. And so at one point, this used to be like a fluctuating number where utilities would be, if there was like a natural disaster and they needed to like build new stuff quickly and they needed to get investors to come in, they'd be allowed to increase their investment rate. But then it was supposed to come back down when there was more times of stability. And at some point, I don't know, I want to say it was like 30 years ago or something, they just like, because they have a lot of lobbyists. I think there's 11 lobbyists in Colorado. And this is not just Xcel. This is like all over the country. Utilities are allowed to have this level of profit. They have been allowed to stay at this high number. So I don't know, yeah, maybe 5% or something more in line with like the market, as opposed to, having an outsized investment. But the idea was to like help us build our infrastructure and, incentivize people investing their money. But now it's just sort of become this like boondoggle that utility payers are on the hook for. There's a very interesting article about that that I'll send out that you might find interesting about why that number is so high. That probably explains it better than I just did. All right, so there's two sides of Xcel. There's the electric side and the gas side, which we'll talk about in a second. Xcel is, on the electric side, Xcel is required to cut its greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2030 from state law, that's state law. And it has an internal goal to use only carbon-free energy by 2050. There is also a state statute that we have to reduce our emissions by 100% by 2050. So that's also law, but right now they do have an internal goal of carbon-free energy. However, while they are continuing like proposing big investments in clean energy, they're also proposing investments in new gas power plants, which could go against climate targets. And in its latest plan, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they had asked to build new gas plants that would produce nearly as much as all of the coal plants that are shutting down in Colorado. So basically, replacing coal with natural gas. And the company has said that it plans to run new gas plants for at least 25 years, which is well past their 2030 and 2050 climate goals. The other thing that is factoring in that isn't Xcel's fault is that there are 2 coal plants slated to close by the end of this year. But the Trump administration is threatening to delay those closures using the Federal Powers Act, which they have done in Michigan already. And so we are actually expecting that order to come through any day. And we're not sure if there's a delay because of the shutdown or if they will, have this happen closer to the end of the year. But as of like a couple weeks ago, we were just sort of expecting it any day. On the gas side, Xcel is required by law to cut greenhouse gas emissions from its gas system by 22% by 2030. It does keep spending money to grow its gas system instead. Last year, they added 14,000 new gas customers in Colorado, and its plans show that that gas use will continue to increase every year at a time when they're supposed to be reducing their emissions. Xcel has also proposed spending $2.8 billion to fix or build gas pipelines and equipment to deliver more gas to customers in Colorado. And that is the gas infrastructure plan where they're proposing that. We'll talk more about that. But I think the trend, right, that we're seeing here is we have these statutory laws that and targets that Xcel needs to be hitting, and the trend is going in the wrong direction. Any questions so far, or additional questions? Okay. Just a reminder for new folks who have joined, I can't see hands raised, so just jump in if you have questions. So I wanted to provide an update on the docket that we worked on over the summer. Meg was very involved in this. But this was, so I'll give a little background for folks. Basically, there are some coal plants slated to close by 2031. Those will be the last coal plants, in theory, in Colorado to close by 2031, one of which is in Pueblo. And they're calling, it's an electric resource plan. So it's basically, what is Xcel's plan to replace that energy lost by the coal plants? And it also needed to include a just transition plan for Pueblo, which, you know, because their plant is closing, I think 40 years earlier than it was supposed to. So how is there going to be a transition plan for them to replace those lost jobs and tax revenue? So those were the two goals of what was supposed to happen within this docket. And Xcel came to the PUC and was asking for an astronomical amount of load growth. They claimed that they needed between 10,000 and 14,000 megawatts of new demand for electricity by the time that last coal plant is closed. But to put that into context, its entire portfolio of wind, solar, gas, and coal generating capacity is only 6,400 megawatts. So they were asking to potentially more than double what was on the full grid for them in the state. And what they were saying, the reason was, is really accounting for this, you know, for all the data centers and the AI capacity that we need, that we think is coming in Colorado. So it was really based on projection of all kinds of data centers coming and putting their load on our grid. And their proposal, this was what they said in their testimony, that the build out for getting to 10,000 to 14,000 megawatts would have increased electricity customer rates by 50% by 2031. While large commercial and industrial customers, such as data centers, their rates would remain flat. This is from their testimony. They also were proposing we called them slush funds. They didn't like that term, but it was about $1 billion that customers would be paying for them to invest in early stage experiments and unproven technologies like carbon capture and nuclear. And ratepayers would be taking all of the risk of those experiments, and Xcel would not have to take any of the risk. So that was their proposal, and we worked in coalition with a lot of organizations that were pushing back against this for obvious reasons. And so the PUC did make their decision on just this is just the first phase of this. And then there will be a second phase starting shortly, but the PUC reduced their plan and approved 7,000 megawatts, which feels far more in line with what might be needed. We are going to see a bigger demand from just customers shifting from gas to electricity. The population is still growing and all of these things, so we do need more growth. But it's a much more realistic number in our minds. Most of this new power, about 80% will come from renewable energy, and the rest might come from battery storage. That sort of remaining 20%, we're still worried they might try to propose gas plants being built to create that energy, but that will be in the next phase. And then they also must get signed agreements from data centers and other big energy users before it adds power for them. So we can't just make these big projections that all these data centers are going to come, because it may not even happen. We don't really know that we're going to have all these data centers coming to Colorado. So we shouldn't be building anything until we know they're coming.
Do the signed agreement just means they commit to coming and therefore we can build new power sources for them? Or would it be, we're not at the stage yet in the dockets where they would share the increase in rates that they cause? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question, Meg. And what I think, there's going to be another docket in January that deals with these sorts of things. So I think that in January, that docket will kind of help determine how Xcel is going to be, and other utilities are going to be dealing with data center build out. So it's a good question. I think it will be dealt with in a different docket. So this next phase will start in the fall, and that will decide exactly which new energy projects move forward. So that will be an important docket for us to plug into as well. So I think what this highlights is that what we did mattered, and we did have, I mean, the PUC was really freaked out by that 50% rate increase. They mentioned it a number of times. And so, you know, certainly Xcel overstepped, but I think we definitely had an impact. And so just wanted to share that good news, that we made a difference. All right, let's talk about the gas infrastructure plan, or the GIP. So what is the GIP? It's a long-term gas system plan. So basically it's how Xcel is going to operate and upgrade and meet customer demand over the next 5 years. I just jumped ahead of myself. So this has to be filed every 2 years. So this is just ongoing constantly, all the work at the PUC. So every 2 years, and it covers a 5-year planning period. This one, it has already started. I think it started in September, and the decision will be made March 25th of next year. What is Xcel proposing? We already talked about this a little bit. And so, you know, the gist is that they are proposing spending $2.8 billion on new or repaired gas infrastructure in order to deliver more gas for Colorado customers. So going, you know, again, in the wrong direction for hitting that 22% reduction. Some of this new infrastructure has a lifetime of up to 72 years. So way far past the state goals, but also impacting cities and counties that also have their own decarbonization goals that are going to be impacted by what Xcel and other utilities do. So we have 5 asks in this GIP, and they're pretty reasonable, I would say. So the first one is to stop growing the gas system, limit new gas connections to avoid burning more or building more gas infrastructure, that we would need to pay for. Because these will really be stranded assets, which means they're going to build these gas plants and we're going to pay for them long after they're being used. And as more people transition to electricity or electric, the electric side from gas, and they, you know, transition to heat pumps and solar, and they're getting gas out of their homes, the remaining gas customers are going to see their rates increase astronomically because they're still paying for these investments, because somebody has to pay for them. We want them to focus on clean heat options, so using cleaner alternatives like electric heating and geothermal for new buildings and replacements. Informing customers about clean options, so making sure that Xcel is giving customers, their gas customers, information and tools to help them understand like what their alternatives are. That we want them to meet their clean heat goals. That this is, you know, another ability to, you know, or opportunity to state that this is the statute that says 22% reduction by 2030. And we want them to work with communities, local governments in long-term planning to make sure that those municipalities and counties and communities goals are incorporated into Xcel's plans as well. I guess before I get there, are there any questions? I kind of ran through that quickly, but it's, yeah, let me know if there's questions on that.
I have a question. I'm not sure how directly it relates to this conversation, but the PUC, do they also oversee water as a utility?
That is a good question. I don't think so. I think there is a separate regulatory body for water, because water is very complicated. And I don't think they do, but let me look into that.
Okay,
Like,
I was just curious because I know especially data centers and everything are going to use an astronomical amount of water in a state that already has very limited water resources. So I was just curious if that played into this, but it sounds like that would be a separate conversation.
yeah, I think so. And also just a note on that, there is a bill being drafted right now around data centers, which I kind of referenced in the beginning of the call, but basically that bill, which we're going to be working on, with Mamas will be working on, will help sort of set some parameters around, like, when these data centers are coming, how are we making sure they aren't using too much water, that they aren't taking us off of our energy grid, our energy climate goals rather, that they're not going to raise rates for people because they are, using massive amounts of energy and maybe not paying their fair share. And so I know water is definitely going to be incorporated into that conversation. So happy to keep you posted on that as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question too. Is Xcel planning on having our climate goal laws overturned? Is that why they're operating in such a way that sort of disregards what's already in place? They aren't working within the state legal framework, it doesn't sound like. Are they counting on this administration eliminating, overruling such state guidelines, or?
That's a good question, Meg. I don't know. I mean, I do feel like this didn't just start this year in terms of Xcel pushing back on some of this stuff. And publicly, you aren't hearing any of this stuff. They often say, talk about how they're greening up the grid, and all of these renewable incentives are available to you, and it makes it sound like they're really on board with this. And then you hear all the things they're doing behind the scenes. So yeah, it's a good question. I don't know, maybe, yeah.
Sarah, I have a question about the 72-year timeline. Is there an argument that Xcel makes for that particular timeline, and why is that something that the PUC has not already rejected? Or, is there like a preliminary period where they can say, no, this is not reasonable, especially for our taxpayers, and this is not in our best interests? Or, is there a reason why they didn't do that?
Well, they still can. So this is just the initial proposal. And the 72 year timeline is like the equipment that or like the infrastructure that they're going to build out to add more gas customers is just meant to last that long. So it's not necessarily that they're saying we're going to be using this for 72 years, but like it might take a long time to pay off equipment, that's going to last that long. So, but the answer is, the good news is we do have time to weigh in on this. So in November, the PUC will be opening public comment, and different organizations are going to be weighing in more like on the technical side of things, that have that technical background, which is not us. We'll be weighing in as like ratepayers and families concerned about air pollution and climate and rates. But that will be our opportunity to say, this is ridiculous. Like, we shouldn't be, building this new infrastructure that's going to last, well past, like way past our climate goals. And then still be paying them off when we're all, working off of a different system. So there is opportunity.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
Yeah. Good question. Okay, so how we can plug in is coming up, and I don't have talking points or anything quite yet, but basically there are sort of two major ways that we plug in. One is submitting written comments to the public utilities. So we will be sending out an email that has like all the information for how you can submit the comments. We usually write something up as like a template for you to use, but you can edit it and put in your specific concerns. And those have to be read by the PUC. They have to read every single comment that comes in. You can also provide verbal public comment at a public comment hearing. And we are told that will be in November, and written comments are usually accepted pretty much up until the decision. So we have all through the winter into the spring, into the early spring to do that. But the public comment hearings are very effective. As I mentioned, sometimes there's only 50 people on there. Sometimes there's less than that on these really important decisions. And so we can have an outsized impact. It's 3 minutes of testimony. You don't have to speak that long. And you jump on, it's always virtual, at least nowadays. So you call in from wherever you are, you raise your hand, indicating you want to speak. And then once they call on you, you give your comments, and then you can go about your day. And so we'll be sending more information out about that as soon as it gets set. And we'll have talking points. I can help you write your testimony if you need help thinking that through. But it is a really effective way to add your voice to this. And then another option would be to send a letter to your mayor or your council members about your concerns, because we also, there's often local officials that testify at these public hearings, and it's good for them to hear what their constituents think about this, and that like we want to hit our goals. We don't want rate increases. Like this all impacts our local governments as well. So they should be engaged. And that's it. That's all I had for this piece. And then I have a couple of next steps or, announcement next dates, but I wanted to make sure there were no more questions about either the GIF or anything else that we talked about. Awesome. Okay. Well, if any questions come up, please email me. If I can't answer it, I will find the answer. I know that this is technical and it's a very, it's a very complicated process. So our goal is to make it accessible for folks and understandable. So if I haven't done that, please let me know. Okay, so just a couple of upcoming events and actions in our last 2 minutes here. Don't forget, November 4th is Election Day. It is City Council and School Board in most places. There may be some other things on your ballot, but those are kind of big elections this year, so make sure you vote. November, again, like this is just saying that we're waiting for the date, but the Public Utilities Commission public hearing on the GIF and written comments will start. Then our next lunch bunch is November 12th. We don't have a topic picked out quite yet, but I think we might be doing something on public lands. And then we do this call every second Wednesday of the month from 12 to 12:45. So mark your calendar if you're interested in sitting in on this. It's great to be on here live, but we do also record it, of course, in case you can't make it and you want to watch it later.